In this podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to accept personal responsibility. We've already covered some of the differences between college and high school. And unless you've actually attended college before, most of you are probably comparing high school to college because high school was the only school experience you had to sort of compare to college. Okay, but we know there are a lot of differences between college and high school. In high school, you had transportation to get you to school. You were required to be there and attend all of your classes. You had reminders of assignments that were due. You had people watching over you as you were working, and in college, a lot of those things don't hold true. And as a result, the responsibility is going to fall back on you to make sure that you're getting what you need and that you're learning and that you are successful. Okay, let's share just a quick clip regarding the concept of blame.
How many of you are blamers? How many of you, when something goes wrong, the first thing you want to know is whose fault it is? Hi, my name is Brene. I am a blamer. Let me just tell you this quick story. So this is a couple years ago when I first realized the magnitude to which I blame. I'm in my house. I have on white slacks and a pink sweater set, and I'm drinking a cup of coffee in my kitchen. It's a full cup of coffee. I drop it on the tile floor. It goes into a million pieces, splashes up all over me. And the a millisecond after it hit the floor, right out of my mouth is this: damn you, Steve. Who is my husband? Because let me tell you how fast this works for me. So Steve plays water polo with a group of friends. And the night before, he went to go play water polo. And I said, hey, make sure you come back at 10, because I can never fall asleep until you're home. And he got back at 10:30. And so I went to bed a little bit later than I thought. Ergo, my second cup of coffee that I probably would not be having had he come home when we discussed. Therefore, and so the rest of that story is I'm cleaning up the kitchen. Steve calls, caller ID. I'm like, hey. He's like, hey, what's going on, babe? What's going on? So I'll tell you exactly what's going on. I'm cleaning up the coffee that spilled all, like dial tone. Because he knows. How many of you go to that place when something bad happens, the first thing you want to know is whose fault is it? I'd rather it be my fault than no one's fault. Because why? Why? Because it gives us some semblance of control. But here, if you enjoy blaming, this is where you should stick your fingers in your ear and do the na thing, because I'm getting ready to ruin it for you. Because here's what we know from the research. Blame is simply the discharging of discomfort and pain. It has an inverse relationship with accountability. Accountability, by definition, is a vulnerable process. It means me calling you and saying, hey, my feelings were really hurt about this, and talking. It's not blaming. Blaming is simply a way that we discharge anger. People who blame a lot seldom have the tenacity and grit to actually hold people accountable, because we expend all of our energy raging for 15 seconds and figuring out whose fault something is. And blaming is very corrosive in relationships, and it's one of the reasons we miss our opportunities for empathy. Because when something happens and we're hearing a story, we're not really listening. We're in the place where I was, making the connections as quickly as we can about whose fault something was.
Okay, so thinking a little bit about control, she mentioned, that if you can blame yourself for something, at least you have control over it. There is a term, it is called locus of control, and it literally means location of control, locus being the Latin word for location or place. So place of control. And depending on how you were raised, among other things, other environmental factors, determines where you believe your sense of control is located. Okay, so if you have an internal locus of control, it is within you. So people who have an internal locus of control believe that they control their destiny, their future, what happens to them. If you have an external locus of control, you believe that either other people, a higher power, maybe a god, some sort of higher power in nature, something else has control over you, and you're sort of more like a pinball that's sort of just being bumped around without really having any control over what happens to you. And this becomes important. Again, some of this could come culturally. We may experience differences in terms of the locus of control, but even those people who do believe in an external locus of control have to at least feel that they have some internal ability to control things. Otherwise, we wouldn't be at school because we wouldn't think that we could learn or that it mattered that we learned because whatever would be would be. And so having at least some sense of an internal locus of control becomes really important. Okay, because at the end of the day, things can happen to us in our lives, things that we don't have control over. A car pulls out in front of you. Um, your computer broke down, and as a result, you didn't get your first choice of classes when you registered. Those are all things that happen that we don't have control over. But how we react to those situations, we do have control over, and that's where having a strong internal locus of control can help you to be more successful in your day-to-day life. Okay, so our book talks about the difference between victims and creators. So we've got two types of people. Victims are the type of people, and you may know somebody like this. Hopefully you aren't this person, but we all, I think, know somebody like this. They blame other people constantly. Um, they complain a lot. They're very unhappy people. If you think back to the video we just watched where she showed that blaming is actually discomfort and pain being verbalized, it's coming out and used against other people. Victims make excuses for things. And they tend to just continue to repeat the same patterns and behaviors that are making them miserable in the first place. Okay, a creator, on the other hand, is somebody who seeks solutions. So it doesn't mean that bad things don't happen to them or that they don't have bad days, but again, how do they react to those situations? A creator will see a problem and take action to solve that problem or to make improvements in their lives. And they're also willing to try new behaviors. They realize that the previous behaviors didn't work, and therefore they're willing to try new things that hopefully will work in order to create a better life for him or her. So here, if we see this little image here of the mouse with the toast, and we can see he's trying to get it up on top of the box and he can't, but he continues trying. A victim would probably just walk away. Maybe the little mouse as a victim would starve because he couldn't figure it out, and he would just complain and blame everybody else why he couldn't get the bread up on top of the box. But notice this mouse is a creator. He continues to seek out new ways until, yay, he got the bread on the top of the box. So again, it's how we react in situations like this that determine whether, we're going to go forward being victims or creators, and whether we'll be successful or not successful in our endeavors. And within each of us, we constantly have this sense of self-talk. It may sound silly that, well, I'm hearing voices inside my head, but really we all do. We have voices inside our heads that try to convince us one way or the other in everything that we do. So we're always having this inner conversation with ourselves. And the book breaks these voices down into 3 different parts. So voice number 1 is the inner critic. Voice number 2 is the inner guide, and voice number 3 is the inner defender. Okay, and I put this as a pendulum because if you begin to swing in either direction, to the direction of the critic or the direction of the defender, you're falling into the role of a victim. The guide has a sense of balance. The guide is the voice of reason. Okay, so as I mentioned, the inner critic and the inner defender are both victims. They're types of victims. They act as victims. Okay, the inner critic, and I capitalize the I because the inner critic points the finger inwards. They blame themselves for whenever things go wrong. They put themselves down. I'm horrible at math. I can never do anything right. I'll never be able to figure this out. These people have an incredibly low self-esteem, and a lot of times they're afraid to take risks because they're afraid of failing. Because again, failure comes back to that. It was my fault. I can't do anything right, and they end up feeling really bad. Okay, so that's the inner critic. The inner defender, I highlighted the word defend because if you think about self-defense, like martial arts as a self-defense, normally you're defending against other people. Okay, so the inner defender likes to blame other people. Okay, so she put questions on the tests that we never covered in class. My boss scheduled me for way too many hours, and I'd have been on time if it wasn't for the stupid road work going on. So they make excuses and blame other people for why they haven't achieved the things that maybe they should have. The inner guide, on the other hand, works in that creator mode, which is where you want to be. So in the event of a test that you did poorly on, rather than blaming yourself, rather than blaming the teacher, you don't really have to worry about blame. You can say, maybe you do blame yourself a little bit that I didn't study enough. But more importantly, you think about your actions moving forward. I will begin studying every night. Okay, I will leave earlier so that I can get here on time because there's road work going on. I will clarify with my boss that I'm unable to work 8 hours on Tuesdays. Okay, notice the terminology there. I will. Creators take action. The inner guide enables you to take action. I will do this. I will do that. Take note, there's a difference between saying I will and saying I'll try. Okay, creators don't try to do. Creators actually do something. So I will is the starting phrase for a creator. I will do this. I will do that. So the key in accepting personal responsibility is, again, we can't always control everything that happens in our lives, but we can control how we react to those things, and we can make choices that allow us to move forward and hopefully avoid negative situations in the future. And really, you have to understand that the power lies in you and you alone to make that difference.